There is a story I keep coming back to whenever I want to remember how thin the line between two centuries can actually be. London, autumn 1605. A city of damp leather, sea coal smoke, and prayers whispered behind shuttered doors. 300 years of English identity are about to pivot on a single night, and almost no one in the kingdom knows it yet. A small circle of country gentlemen, respected, well-connected, devout, are about to attempt the most audacious thing anyone has ever attempted on these islands. And the only reason you grew up in the country you grew up in is because, by the breadth of one anonymous letter and one nervous hand on a lantern, they did not succeed. We are Arthur's living history, and using AI trained on Jacobean engravings, recusant letters, and the half-faded interrogation books of the Tower, we are bringing the lanterns back up on a night that almost was. The Strand, the 20th of May, 1604. A small upstairs room at an inn called the Duck and Drake. The shutters are closed. Outside, London hums with hawkers and hooves on cobblestone. Inside, 5 men sit around a wooden table that smells of tallow and old beer. They are passing a small leather-bound prayer book between them. Each man, in turn, presses his hand to the page and swears an oath of absolute secrecy. In the next room over, and this is the part that always unsettles me, a Jesuit priest named John Gerard, who knows nothing of what has just happened, is quietly celebrating Mass. The 5 men finish their oath, walk through the doorway, kneel, and take communion. None of them will see Christmas 1605 as a free man. Let me tell you who is in that room. Their leader is Robert Catesby, 32 years old, tall, charismatic, the son of a wealthy, recusant family from Warwickshire, a man whose presence in a room rearranges the people around him. He has lost his young wife Catherine to fever, his infant son to the same, his estate to Crown fines, and almost his own life to the Essex Rebellion of 1601, when he rode out behind the doomed Earl in the Strand and took a halberd blow at the Earl's door. He has survived every door English Catholicism has slammed in his face, and he has decided, after a long autumn of prayer and rage, that the door must be answered with thunder. Beside him sits Thomas Wintour, his cousin and right hand, fluent in Spanish and Italian, recently returned from Flanders. Then John Wright, a swordsman with a stammer and a fearsome reputation. Then Thomas Percy, kinsman to the Earl of Northumberland, freshly appointed to the band of gentlemen pensioners. The 50-man bodyguard of the king himself, a position he is about to abuse in the most spectacular way in English history. And finally, a tall, soft-spoken soldier with a flowing auburn beard, just back from a decade campaigning in the Spanish Netherlands. Yorkshire-born, Italian-tongued, an explosives specialist, he calls himself Guido. The English know him as Guy Fawkes. What you have to understand is the long humiliation behind them. England has been a Protestant kingdom for almost half a century. To attend a Catholic Mass is a crime. To shelter a Catholic priest is to invite the worst sentence the law can hand down. Recusant families pay punishing fines simply for refusing to attend Anglican services. When the old Queen Elizabeth finally fades from her cushions in March 1603, English Catholics allow themselves one brief, fragile hope. Her successor, James VI of Scotland, has a Catholic wife. He has whispered tolerant things in private letters. He might, just possibly, set them free. In his first speech to Parliament, James announces he detests the Catholic faith. The penal laws stiffen, the fines double. Priests are hunted in attics across the kingdom. Catesby's hope has just been finished, and his patience with it. So the plan that emerges is breathtaking in its scope. Not a single targeted strike, not a kidnapping. The complete physical removal of the entire Protestant establishment in one moment. The king, the king's heir, the bishops, the lords, the senior judges, all gathered in one chamber at the state opening of Parliament. Bring that chamber down, Catesby reasons, and the kingdom is leaderless in a single afternoon. In the chaos that follows, a Midlands uprising will seize the king's 9-year-old daughter, Princess Elizabeth, install her as a Catholic puppet sovereign, and restore the old faith by force of arms. It is regicide on an industrial scale. And to do it, they will need a great deal of black powder, a chamber to put it in, and a man who knows how to set it off. Honestly, the sheer arithmetic of it still leaves me cold. 5 men in a Strand Inn deciding to erase the political class of a nation in one breath. I have read this story half a dozen times, and it still does not feel quite real. Their first plan is to dig. Percy uses his royal pensioner credentials to lease a small property adjoining the Houses of Parliament in Wynyard's tenement. On the 11th of December, 1604, the conspirators begin tunnelling toward the foundations of the House of Lords. Sleeves rolled, candles set in the wall, the air thick with chalk dust and damp brick. They work in shifts, they sleep on straw. By March 1605, the tunnel has reached the great stone wall of Parliament itself. Whether they actually got through it is still disputed by historians. No remains of a tunnel have ever been found, and some suspect the government invented the detail later to make the conspirators look more desperate than they were. What is certain is that in March 1605, an extraordinary piece of luck drops into their laps. A vault directly beneath the House of Lords, a vast brick undercroft, 77 feet long, 24 feet wide, 10 feet high, falls vacant. It has been used for storing firewood. Percy quietly leases it. They abandon the tunnel. Now the barrels begin to arrive. From a safe house across the Thames at Lambeth, ferried over the river by night, rowed in muffled oars to the Westminster water stairs, and rolled into the undercroft after dark. 20 in the first shipment, 16 more by the 20th of July. 36 barrels in all, roughly 1,400 kilograms of black powder. Enough, by every modern calculation, to reduce the entire Palace of Westminster to splinters and white smoke. Fawkes covers them with bundles of firewood and old iron bars to keep them out of sight. And then the plague returns to London. The state opening of Parliament is delayed, and delayed again. Sitting in his cellar through the muggy summer of 1605, Fawkes finds, to his horror, that some of the powder has begun to decay in its casks. He arranges, quietly, for fresh barrels to be substituted. The fuse is now timed for the morning of the 5th of November. And it is the months of waiting that get me. Not the act, not the powder, the patience. Sitting in a cellar through a London summer with enough black powder to end a city, waiting for a parliament that keeps being delayed. That kind of conviction is harder to picture than the act itself. Doubt begins to creep in. Catesby has been asking, in carefully veiled terms, whether the Jesuit Superior of England, Father Henry Garnet, considers it lawful to take the lives of the innocent alongside the guilty. Garnet, appalled, tells him it can in no case be approved. Another Jesuit, Father Oswald Tessimond, learns the full plot in confession from Catesby himself and is bound by canon law to silence. The priests beg, through hints and side channels, that the plan be abandoned. Catesby will not be turned. What none of them know is that one of the latest recruits, Francis Tresham, has cold feet, and Tresham's brother-in-law is a man named William Parker, the 4th Baron Monteagle, a Catholic peer who would be in the chamber when it comes down. On the evening of the 26th of October, 1605, a servant approaches Lord Monteagle at his supper in Hoxton with a sealed letter. No signature, no seal. Monteagle has his secretary read it aloud. The words have echoed down 4 centuries. My lord, out of the love I bear to some of your friends, I have a care of your preservation. Retire yourself into the country, for though there be no appearance of any stir, yet they shall receive a terrible blow this Parliament, and yet they shall not see who hurts them. Monteagle is on his horse to Whitehall before midnight. The letter reaches Robert Cecil, Earl of Salisbury, the spymaster who has effectively run the English state since the old Queen's day. Cecil, a small, hunched man with a quick, brilliant mind, reads it once, twice, 3 times. He does not move immediately. He waits for the king to return from his hunting at Royston, places the letter in his hand, and watches James puzzle out the meaning himself. Some historians argue Cecil already knew and let the plot ripen so that he could spring the trap with maximum theatre. Whether that is true, no one will ever quite be able to prove. A first quiet inspection of the Westminster cellars on the afternoon of the 4th of November turns up nothing alarming. Just an oddly tall, brown-bearded man in a cloak who calls himself John Johnson and says he is a servant looking after firewood for his master Thomas Percy. The inspectors leave, but James, who has already survived one famous attempt on his life in Scotland in 1600, the Gowrie affair, has the instincts of a man who has been hunted before. He orders a second search, quietly, late. Just before midnight, a justice of the peace named Sir Thomas Knivet, accompanied by an armed party, including a young man named Peter Heywood, descends with lanterns into the undercroft. They find the same tall man, now booted and spurred, a cloak around his shoulders, a long fuse in one hand, a small iron lantern in the other, a box of slow matches in his pocket. He is standing among the firewood. Peter Heywood steps forward and seizes the lantern out of Fawkes's grip a heartbeat before the spark can be set. That single act of a young man's reflex saves the lives of the king, the heir, the entire House of Lords, and arguably the Protestant succession itself. And here is the part that gives me chills every time. That iron lantern is still in existence. You can stand in front of it today, in a glass case in the Ashmolean Museum at Oxford. A small, blackened, 400-year-old thing that once held the difference between 2 entirely different versions of British history. Imagine being Peter Heywood in the moment after his hand closed on it. I genuinely cannot. Fawkes is bound and dragged before James in the small hours of the 5th. He is calm. He is courteous. He gives his name as John Johnson and offers no other information. Asked what he intended, he answers simply, to blow Scots beggars back to their native mountains. The remark is recorded with a wince by the courtiers and a flicker of something like respect by the king himself, who later describes Fawkes as possessing a Roman resolution. On the 6th of November, James writes a personal warrant in his own hand. The gentler tortures, he instructs, are to be used first, and then by degrees the harsher. Sir William Ward, Lieutenant of the Tower, takes charge of the questioning in the Great Hall of the King's House overlooking Tower Green. Fawkes is suspended in manacles. He says little. Then he is taken to the rack. He holds out for a full day, then another. On the 7th of November, his resolve breaks. On the 8th, he begins to give names. By the 10th, when he is required to sign a long confession, his hand has been so damaged by the rack that the signature is a barely formed scrawl, a faint Guido in shaking ink at the bottom of the page. The document survives. Compare it with his earlier signatures, and you can read his suffering in the way the quill failed him. While Fawkes is breaking in the Tower, his fellow plotters are riding hard for the Midlands, trying and failing to raise a Catholic rising. The country gentlemen they had counted on shut their doors and bolt them. The rain comes down without pause. At Warwick Castle, they help themselves to horses, at Norbrook to weapons, at Huddington to a last shared mass. By the time they reach Holbeche House in Staffordshire on the night of the 7th of November, they are soaked through, exhausted, and short of dry powder. They lay what powder they have in front of the fireplace to dry. A stray spark from the fire sets it off. John Grant loses his sight in the blast. Catesby, Rookwood, and others are scorched. By 11 the next morning, the 8th of November, the Sheriff of Worcester arrives with 200 armed men and surrounds the house. The conspirators barricade the doors. Wintour later says he found Catesby grim and resolute, and that the survivors had agreed among themselves, "We mean here to die." The musket fire begins. Wintour is hit in the shoulder. The Wright brothers fall. Then, in a moment so unlikely that contemporaries struggled to describe it, Catesby and Percy, standing back to back near the doorway, are both struck by a single musket ball from the same weapon. Catesby crawls inside the house on his hands and knees, finds a small painted image of the Virgin Mary on a table, takes it in his arms, and is no longer of this world by the time the soldiers reach him. The image, along with the gold crucifix at his throat, is sent to London to be paraded as proof of what superstitious objects had moved the plotters. The musket holes in the Holbeche walls are still visible today. The trial of the 8 surviving conspirators opens in Westminster Hall on the 27th of January 1606. The verdict is a foregone conclusion. Catesby and Percy's remains are raised from their hasty burial, and the final stroke given posthumously, their heads sent to be displayed on spikes outside the building they had meant to bring down. The chronicler of the day calls them sightless spectators of their own failure. On the 30th of January, in St. Paul's churchyard, the sentence reserved for traitors against the Crown is carried out on Sir Everard Digby, Robert Wintour, John Grant, and Thomas Bates. On the 31st, in Old Palace Yard at Westminster, directly opposite the chamber they had plotted against, the 4 remaining, Thomas Wintour, Ambrose Rookwood, Robert Keyes, and last of all Guy Fawkes himself, faced the same sentence. Fawkes, weakened by the rack, climbs the ladder slowly. At the top, he chooses his moment, leans into the drop, and the fall carries him from the world before the sentence can run its full medieval course. He is the last and the most quietly composed of them all. Parliament passes the observance of the 5th of November Act within weeks. Special church services, bonfires, fireworks, mandated by law in every English parish every November the 5th, for the next 250 years, until the Act is finally repealed in 1859. Even after repeal, the custom does not stop. It thickens. Effigies, children in the streets asking for a penny for the guy, Roman candles over country fields, whole towns lit by burning straw figures wearing painted masks of a soldier from Yorkshire. And here is the part of the story I find genuinely strange. The man whose name is shouted across the bonfires every November was not the architect. Catesby was. And yet it is Fawkes, the soldier in the cellar with the lantern, whose face has become the universal symbol of a refusal to be governed. His mask is now worn by protesters in Hong Kong, in Cairo, in Washington, in London. Most of them with no notion that the historical Fawkes was a devout Catholic who wanted to install a 9-year-old Catholic queen. You can stand in the Palace of Westminster today on a quiet weekday morning, and the yeomen of the guard will still descend ceremonially into those cellars before each state opening of Parliament, holding lanterns of their own, going through the motions of a search that began in the small hours of one November night 4 centuries ago. A small ritual nobody has been willing to stop. I find that astonishing. A piece of paranoia from 1605 that has simply never quite let go. The plotters lost. Catholic emancipation would not come for another 224 years. The English Protestant identity hardened around the memory of that almost vanished night into something tribal, something that shaped empires and revolutions and the long argument over who in these islands was allowed to belong. None of that was decided in a chamber. It was decided in a cellar, in the dark, by a young man's hand closing on a lantern. We are Arthur's living history, and stories like this one, the ones where the entire course of a century turns on a single nervous breath, are why we sit up too late piecing them back together. Tell us in the comments which moment stopped your breath. Tell us which forgotten plotter, which queen, which whisper from a Jesuit letter you would like us to chase down next. Subscribe if you want to keep walking these centuries with us, because what we are building from here will be sharper, stranger, and braver than anything we have lit so far. History, like a long burning fuse, sometimes takes its time. And we, like Haywood with his hand on the lantern, keep watching the flame.